Okay, hello everyone. I'm Thomas George. So today, before I get started, I just want to get an idea of. I'm pretty sure that most of the people here are developers and those connected on those sides. Anybody here from QA or testing? So who has some context on what I'm going to be talking about? All right. So when we are talking about games and developing games specifically, one of the topics that gets neglected, or I wouldn't say neglected, it gets deprioritized a lot, is testing. We bring in testing quite late into the game at times. So today, along with testing, I'll also be talking about different things that different approaches that we can have while we are thinking about testing for the games that we develop. So before I start, I'll start with a bit about myself. So I've been part of the gaming industry for over around 15 years now. I joined it following my passion. I've been part of QA since 2008. I have done a bit of development along the way, mostly web development. And currently I'm a QA project manager at Keyword Studios. So Keyword Studios is one of the biggest solution providers for different developers and publishers who need any kind of service across the life cycle of game development. So we provide services like art, audio, game development as well. We provide FQA services, LQA, localization services. There's also player support. So it covers pretty much the entire spectrum of what you would need in a game development lifecycle. We have more than 12,000 employees globally. We have 70 different studios in 26 countries. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be talking about testing, things that we may need to think about while we are approaching testing. So again, we come across a lot of games that come out in the market, which have very good gameplay. Looks amazing, has great storyline, but it's so buggy that people completely get frustrated by how things are panning out. We do have examples all over the place that we can think of. So and once that happens, it completely ruins the confidence of the players in the game, in the developer, and it also starts shooting up the costs that we may incur while we are working on. So it's very, very important to ensure that we incorporate testing as early as possible and do the right kind of testing at the right stages of the different stages of building a game. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was planning. So whenever we are setting out to build a game, or as a matter of fact any application even, we do a lot of planning in terms of how we are going to structure it, what kind of things we are going to put into it, how much time, how much people, hours, resources we are going to be incorporating it. But the same planning needs to go also into testing. We need to know how much time do we need to allocate, and this needs to be done at the beginning of whenever we are sitting down to decide that we are going to be building something. We need to know what kind of time we will be putting aside for this. We need to know what kind of resources we need to be putting aside for this. We need to have a clear idea of what kind of strategies we would be using for testing. So in terms of strategies, there are things like which stages are going to be covered by what type of testing, because there are I don't know if you guys have heard, there are different types of testing, like smoke testing is there, regression testing is there. So these things add value depending on when and how you do it. So if you don't have a plan and a strategy in place, as soon as you are getting started, it becomes very difficult in the middle and later stages to kind of scramble to get things done so that you have the quality that you would eventually need. So the planning kind of ties into the second point that I wanted to make, which is documentation. As developers, we know that it's a good practice to document the things that we are working on. So the same thing applies in testing as well. So we need to make sure that we have the documentation, like the game design documentation should be there. We need to document the processes that we have. Once we have the plans in place for the kind of testing that we are going to do, we need to know what kind of processes are going to be around it, and once those are in place, we need to make sure that those are documented. This comes in very handy when later on, when we are trying to bring in more people, we are trying to revisit things, and we need the information that we set out to go with. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is a commonly neglected point. We have had clients where documentation would not be there, and we would struggle at the stage where they would need an extra few people, and they would have to go spend a lot of time and effort just trying to do a basic knowledge transfer that they could have otherwise done by having the right kind of documentation. So moving on, another thing that we should have on our minds is having different perspectives when approaching testing, basically. So when you are testing a game, if let's say you have a small team, you have a couple of people that are working on a project. So when you are building something, you are usually very close to it. So it becomes very difficult to see the issues that may crop up. You are so focused on building the game itself, building the feature sets that you are working on, that it's difficult to kind of look at it with a point of view that would uncover issues that may be a serious quality concern. So this can be done in different layers. So when we have a smaller team, the best way to do it is having multiple. So basically, let's say you have two different developers working on the team. So you can have different people look at each other's work by switching the roles. So one guy develops it, the other guy actually looks at it as a tester. This would give you a very elementary level of change in point of view. I have seen out of experience that it helps a lot in picking up basic design deviations. The next layer would be having an internal team, which internal test team, which is focused specifically on testing, and they would have the mindset to uncover any issues that may be setting deep into the game. They would still have some closeness to the game itself, since it's an internal team. However, that still gives a better coverage. And the final layer would be the external team. This is completely isolated. They have more ability, and I would say they're more of a specialist team that has a much more experience in terms of focusing on different areas that may break and getting results that the other layers may not be able to uncover. So again, as I mentioned in the while talking about perspective, so mindset also plays a lot of role into this. So as developers, we always have a mindset of, we always are trying to construct or build something. We have certain designs, we have certain plans, we have certain set of features that we are trying to put together. We are always looking to figure out how to make it work, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, testers usually have to have a more destructive mindset, I would say. They need to focus on finding ways to break the system, the features, and that is a different mindset that I have seen a lot of people struggle with. So in a larger team, so as I mentioned earlier, so if you have a larger team where there is very dedicated team for testing, and there is a dev team and a test team that is completely separate, this becomes easier because they have a very specific focus, and we can pick people who have that kind of a mindset to focus on to approach the purpose that they have. However, when you have a small team and you are developing something and you need to also play the role, it becomes very important to have this understanding of this mindset shift and be able to transition between them as we need. Both of these roles require a lot of creativity. When you are looking to build something, you would need constantly to think out of the box to come up with ways to putting it together. The same goes for testing as well, that you need to be equally creative to figure out ways. You need to have a good understanding of the system in both cases, and you need to have a creative mind to hit the game in a way that it uncovers any breaking points it has and primarily falls apart. It sounds scary when as a developer, and we are always hoping that it doesn't break, but depending on what role we are playing at what time, we need to make sure that we transition and prioritize that mindset and that approach. So, when we are approaching testing, usually it's a very good practice to approach it in a very tiered or in a manner where it is broken up into phases. So whenever we create a build and we add a new feature, make changes, and roll out a new build, we have a lot of bugs that are scattered all over the place. We need to a lot of things that are at times blockers that may cause a lot of issues. So breaking down testing into phases helps in making sure that we are finding those kind of issues in the least amount of time and cost. So in the first phase, usually would include a surface level sweep that you would need to do. You would have to do some smoke testing where you are just checking all the critical functions, making sure they are working. We do that with our unit tests as well. However, this covers in a more system level and feature level as well. So the first step is, or the first phase is to smoke the build and make sure that it's swept in a way that all the surface level issues get covered. This takes very little time and it uncovers a lot of issues that are very much upfront and in your face issues kind of a thing. So after this, we move on to a bit more in-depth testing into features and make sure that we dive a little deeper, not too much into it, but still making sure that every single functionality works the way it should. We also perform negative testing. Negative testing would be putting in inputs and putting in giving the game data that it's not supposed to receive. So this is where you would find some surface level exploits, and this requires some degree of creativity and understanding of the system again. So once this phase is done, usually you would have a game that is somewhat stable and somewhat I wouldn't call it an MVP, but it's very close to that. So after that, the phase 3 comes, where you have to really put on the creativity hat and go destructive on individual features, the integration between the features. You have to make sure that you are aware of the breaking points that there may be in the game. Usually there are always different areas that are susceptible to breaking in whichever kind of game you are building. So if it's a network, it's an online game, you would have areas where it's constantly hitting the network or interacting with multiple people. Hitting those areas and overlapping them with other similar breaking points would result in issues that usually we don't anticipate, and this is the phase we usually uncover the most I would say critical bugs that are very much underneath the layers of design that we have. Sometimes it uncovers things that sometimes it uncovers things that we haven't anticipated that we have, and we may need to adjust our approach for this. So having a tiered approach to testing gives us the coverage and the in-depth assurance of quality that we need in the games that we develop. And it stopped working again. Okay, there was one more thing. Okay, so to sum it up, we need to bring together all these things, all the points that I discussed, be it planning, be it documenting the plans that we have built on, documenting the processes, creating test plans, test cases, making sure that we have everything in place to set out for what we need to do. We need to have the right mindset. We need to have the right perspective for taking up different roles. Because if testing is not addressed at the right time and planned into the overall plan and executed along with the life cycle, it usually ends up being a mess towards the middle or towards the end, where we would end up spending a lot of time and money on scrambling to cover for the issues that we did not manage to pick up. So I think that's pretty much covers most of the points that I had. If you have any questions, I think we do have some time, because this was yes. So I'm sure we have lunch in a few minutes. So if we have any questions, anybody has any questions around this, I can take them a few minutes for now, or we can do it offline as well.
Is it affordable for smaller studios?
I'm sorry?
Is it affordable for smaller studios
So,
to this external testing?
so again, it would depend on the studio as to what kind, how much affordable it would be. Again, there are different ways. As I mentioned, there are different ways this can be done. There are, as long as it is preemptive, you can do this internally. A big chunk of it can be done internally. Externally, yes, there are affordable options. There are options that would give you very specific specialists and experienced people who focus on this. But this is doable, and as I mentioned in a previous slide, 3 different layers are there where you can actually attack this. Between developers, internal test team, setting up an internal test team, focusing on that, or external, depending on what kind of coverage you want and what kind of budget you have, I guess. Any other questions? No, I think we can wrap it up. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to come up. I'll be here for a while. So thank you, guys.